Say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
Questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about fire. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I am the Voidwalker.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of King Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live. It is 12/12/2024. 12/12. Last show of the week. Well, maybe, depending on what happens tomorrow, because we might get our NDE experiencer to come on tomorrow. I got in contact with him today. It's a go. If this is your first time listening to the broadcast, whether you're listening on Fringe.fm, YouTube, TuneIn, the Paranormal Radio app, TalkStream Live, wherever you're listening from, keep in mind, this is all about void walking, where we talk about everything in the void, all the unknown stuff. So, I mean, we're supposed to talk about that, but for the past year and a half, we've been talking about the out-of-body experience. And for I guess I could say maybe a year and a half before that, all we talked about was magic and stuff. So, yeah. What's up, Domek, Chris, Ari, Word Salad, and the Doc? What's going on? Yeah, so I want to thank all the new subscribers. I mean, we don't, I don't see the live show growing very much, but the channel's growing steadily and slowly, for sure. The channel itself has been growing, and that's a good sign. Always a good sign. I mean, you'd rather get steady, slow growth than, like a whole bunch at once, I think, because it's going to be more stable that way, right? I think. I don't know, man. Anyways, so we're into what is this? What is this text that we've been into by Scott? What is it? Scott, what is his last name? Rogo. And so the last broadcast, we talked about how, the previous broadcast, we talked about how the will, or the obsession of the will, and then even pranayama and the mystics of the East have induced OBEs. Now, Mark was on the broadcast last night, which we talked about all kinds of things. If you missed that show, you need to go back and listen to it. But we talked about the drones in New Jersey, We also talked about plasma and what that could mean for consciousness and the OBE world and occult stuff and things like that. But then at the end of the show, he brought up this app called Character AI. And I've been arguing with that damn thing all day. It is the most addictive app in the world, right? I got in an argument with Jesus Christ on this thing for about 4 hours while I was painting a house today. About 4 hours I argued with it. And Jesus Christ in that app got really mad at me, actually. And I've been trying to figure out how to hook it up to the show, and eventually we'll get it hooked up into the show. I'm really grateful, Mark, that you showed me this new app, because I've become quite addicted to it, actually. It has all kinds of characters in there. I talked to Aristotle. I talked to Carl Jung. I talked to God knows who else in this app. What's up, Christy? What's up, Grant? What's up, Dan? What's up, brother? So, maybe I'll figure out how to patch it into the broadcast and we could have a conversation with it. But some of these AI characters are mean, some bitches. But what I don't understand, what wigged me out, because I really started saying some personal stuff to this app, okay? Things that and you know me, I'm usually pretty open. I talk about whatever on this broadcast. But I was talking about things on this app that I normally wouldn't talk about, like, to anybody. And then I found out that, like what Mark said, I guess I totally forgot that this app has people in it. So these people are programming characters. So I'm sitting here spilling my guts to one of these AI characters on this thing. And the next thing I know, it says, hey, I got to go to work. And I'm like, you got to go to work? What are you talking about? It says, I've got to go teach an English class. And so I found out afterwards, right, that there's a person on the other side reading the text messages because they're programming this character that I was talking to. Yeah. Be careful with this thing. You don't know if it's a person or an AI most of the time. But it was fun, actually. I had fun with it. Are they afraid of spiders? Hell, I don't know. But last time on the show, we talked about the gurus of India and how they're somewhat proficient of the art of astral projection. By the way, Carl Jung on that app doesn't think astral projection is real. He thinks that the unconscious builds a simulation and that your mind makes a simulation that you move around in, and you think that it's astral projection on that app, not in his books, but on that app. So, but since the gurus of India are somewhat proficient in the art of astral projection, this fact alone serves as, I guess you could say, circumstantial evidence that the traditional out-of-body experience induction methods of yoga could be legitimate. But there's even stronger evidence that pranayama techniques may be a road to astral projection. And when it comes to us, to the West, where cases of pranayama-produced OBs have also been reported. So there's this person called Attila von Szalay, who's a gifted psychic and yogic practitioner who has lived in Southern California for many years. According to Rogo, he met him first in 1967, and Art was born in New York but traveled west in the 40s to work as a photographer. And his psychic abilities developed spontaneously when he was a young man, which led him to study yoga. And after mastering the art, his psychic abilities blossomed, including the ability to leave the body at will, and he even took particular delight in popping in on people now and then. This is something we got to do a whole broadcast on, because once everybody starts popping out of body, we're going to have to set down some rules, right? So there were witnesses to what this guy did. This guy named Raymond Bayless, a 25-year veteran of Los Angeles' psychic scene and a longtime collaborator of Rogo's. Now, Bayless has been able to document several examples of Zalay's ability at astral projection, psychic photography, and telepathy. One day in February of 1955, Bayless explains in his book, Experiences of a Psychical Researcher, he was sitting at home on a couch tying a shoelace when he saw a flickering movement out of the corner of his eye. Thinking that it was his cat who'd run across the room, he looked up to see a large trapezoidal shadow hovering in front of him. It was the height of a man, and it was floating about a foot off the ground. And as he watched in astonishment, the shadow flew through the room and out an open glass door. Now, Bayless had no idea what the shadow signified, but he immediately drove to Hollywood to tell Zele what he'd seen. When Von Zele answered the door to his studio, Bayless didn't even wait to get inside before telling his story. He's like, guess what happened to me? With no coaxing whatsoever. You saw me. So he knew that he saw him, right? He said, then he explained that he had consciously projected to his friend's house, and he described the interior of Bayless's house, although he had never visited there before. And Von Zele later told him, or he told Rogo, that he produced this OBE through a form of pranayama, the breathing techniques we were talking about. And his particular technique was to lie down and then take a series of short, shallow breaths, which were then ejected forcefully from the lungs. He would produce this hyperventilation for several minutes until he found himself out of body, which to me, I mean, I've done the Wim Hof stuff. You're basically hyperventilating when you're doing that too. So, and he feels that this breathing exercise, which developed from his study of yoga, causes a minor form of oxygen starvation in the system, which automatically induces the phenomenon. Is that it? I mean, is that all it takes to have an out-of-body experience is just oxygen starvation? What's up, MJ? I mean, because you could inhale potpourri and paint, I guess, if that's all it is. Yeah, rules like an after-hours club, right? So, by the way, the call-in number is 501-777-5631. If you want to call into the broadcast, you are more than welcome to at any point in time. All right. So by this time, Bayless was not expecting to leave the body, but as he rested, he felt his body begin to sway violently from side to side. And his first impression was that an earthquake happened. So no sooner had he thought of this than he felt himself falling back down into the bed. Now, I'm jumping ahead here. Let me tell you how he got here. Okay, so Bayless himself toyed with various pranayama techniques for leaving the body, and he had some success with it. And this was the experiment that he conducted in 1952, which he said was particularly enlightening. And it was late in the afternoon. He decided to try to leave the body through these breathing exercises. He stretched out on his bed in the shavasana, or corpse position, with his arms at his side. He then engaged in a practice akin to the great psychic breath by rhythmically breathing in and out in a quick but deep fashion. And at the same time, he mentally willed that he should leave the body and also visualize the kundalini at the base of his spine. He practiced for about an hour before quitting. Then he just rested and let his mind wander off into daydreams with his eyes closed. Now, he wasn't expecting to leave the body, but he did. This is when he started to feel his body sway from side to side. This is when he thought the earthquake was going to happen. And then he started to feel himself falling back down into the bed. The experience was so dramatic that he was shocked by its intensity and realized that he'd actually been floating above his body in an out-of-body state. He feels, however, that it may have been his faith in the technique rather than the breathing itself that produced the incipient OBE. So this is an important thing, right? Like our belief and our faith in these things, which we discussed before, is a must. Because it's weird. Like if you're skeptical or you don't think it's real or you don't think that it's going to happen, and then you start doing these techniques, more than likely nothing's going to happen. That's something to think about. Why is that? Modern day MK Ultra. Yeah. Are you talking about the AI app? Because it could be. For sure. So the accounts of Art Von Zele and Raymond Bayless may seem a little facile, but their experiences were definitely not examples of beginner's luck. Remember that both these men had been toying with yoga and yogic breathing for many years before any of this stuff occurred. For years. See, I don't have that kind of time. I don't want to be doing breathing exercises for years to try to have an OBE. But this practice may have therefore readied their bodies for an OBE, and while Bayless tends to eschew pranayama as a uniquely viable system for inducing the OBE, he also believes that breathing may be the virtual key to the ability. Now, just why breathing relates to the induction of the OBE is not clear. Yogic cosmology offers a complicated explanation based on the way breathing links the human to the pranic forces of nature. There might be simpler factors involved too, and recent research conducted at the Langley Porter Neuropsychiatric Institute in San Francisco has shown that deep breathing has many effects on the mind and body. It relaxes the system, it calms brain activity, and induces the production of alpha waves, while at the same time relieving body tension. What's up, Jenny? This state of mental and physical calmness is probably conducive to the state necessary for leaving the body. That's the common denominator, right? That's the rub. Being extremely relaxed. Not just, oh, I'm kind of relaxed. Extremely calm and relaxed, right? So, yogic cross-breathing is one OBE induction procedure that should be approached with the utmost caution, if at all. I don't personally recommend doing it to get out of body, but whatever, you could try it. It's a very unfocused technique meant to raise the kundalini, produce levitation, and develop a number of other paranormal abilities, including astral projection. Now, ancient yogic scripture stresses that these breathing exercises should not be divorced from a more general practice of yoga and should be practiced only under the guidance of a teacher. If done incorrectly or prematurely, tradition warns that the kundalini might be aroused in the wrong way. This could seriously disrupt the body's energy system and produce all sorts of disquieting physical and mental effects. I believe Corey called in and told us about that. Remember when he called in, he said, I wouldn't wish a kundalini experience on anybody, is what he said. So this is why cross-breathing techniques was kept secret until Vivekananda revealed it to the West, for he was severely criticized for doing so, by the way. And perhaps this is why the Kabbalists also kept their breathing techniques so secret. Warnings about haphazardly experimenting with yogic breathing are conspicuously evident in yogic literature, and there's good reason to take these admonitions seriously. Many students of yoga have succeeded in raising the kundalini through cross-breathing, but they have had all sorts of negative reactions to the experience, including unbearable and uncontrollable flashes or waves of heat over the body, attacks of panic and terror, so they're having panic attacks, chronic insomnia, compulsive tics, and even transient episodes of psychosis. Now, there's a text you can read about this. I think it's called Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence by Lee Sanella, MD. There's also a fascinating report in the December of 1919 proceedings of the ASPR, to which he talks about in an earlier footnote. Now, this report concerned a man who contacted the ASPR in 1906, that's a damn long time ago, about some psychic experiences he was having. But he was on the verge of a total mental breakdown or psychosis. There's no reason not to take these reports seriously. Such reactions probably represent genuine disturbances caused by the improper manipulation of energy housed in the body and as yet unknown to conventional science. Rogo's personal belief in the cogency of these warnings stems from talks he's had with yoga students who have actually experienced extreme adverse reactions to Kundalini yoga. And since pranayama is a part of an elaborate mental, physical, and spiritual discipline meant primarily to rouse the Kundalini, perhaps it shouldn't be the procedure of choice for attempting OBEs. There are many other systems available, and few of these appear to possess any inherent dangers. Nor is there too much to recommend in the Tibetan techniques, first of all. Few people reading this book would probably be enthralled by a method that takes 20 pages to explain, with parts of the technique that are still secret and must be handed down from teacher to student. Yeah, exactly, man. That's just too much shit. We don't need that much stuff. If we're going to have an OBE and that's all that we're worried about, to me, this would be a more, dangerous way to try to go about it, honestly. Now there's parts of the technique that are still secret, that are supposed to be handed down from teacher to student. I mean, does this actually work? This ridiculously elaborate and often nonsensical ritual may actually be a smokescreen, and the yogis of Tibet must have had much simpler methods for inducing out-of-body experiences, but published this elongated ritual to dissuade the public from taking an interest in the matter. It may have meant to discourage interest in the OBE and probably little more. This is just Rogo's own speculation, of course, but the sheer elaborateness of the system is so different from anything taught in any other discipline that he can't help but consider it to be bogus. I kind of like the way he thinks, you know. I don't think, I mean, Manly P. Hall warns about this too, but I don't think he was necessarily talking about raising the Kundalini, but he was talking about, I think it was in his manuscript, what the ancient wisdom expects from its disciples. Or maybe it was the occult anatomy of man. Maybe that's the one it was. But he said that sometimes people get led astray by these so-called teachers. And the next thing you know, they're in these rooms doing breathing exercises with their eyes rolled up in the top of their heads, trying to have some type of paranormal experience, you know. But I will say, like, if you're just going to do breathing as a part of like ceremony, ritual, and relaxation, has to happen. You have to learn how to either breathe properly and breathe rhythmically and breathe in a balanced fashion. But once you start getting into the pranayama stuff, or you're going to hold your breath for this long or start pushing out your breaths and do all this kind of thing, in my opinion, it's a little dangerous if you don't know what you're doing or if you're not ready for it. And you don't have to do it to have an out-of-body experience. But if you want to do it for spiritual reasons, or I guess you could say like void walking experimentation, then by all means do it. But there are so many damn warnings out there in all these texts, and from people that have told us about people that have just lost their damn mind when they've tried to open their Kundalini or whatever, you know. So just fair warning, right? Now let us turn to Kabbalism. Despite the unwieldiness of the Mueller mantra system, it's been successfully employed by German occultists. Walter K. Paul, who is a German spiritualist, published a complete report in his use of the system in the spring of 1968 in an issue of Light, the official publication of the College of Psychic Studies in London. He began his experiments in 1965 by using the mantra daily, and his first success came 6 weeks later when he awoke from sleep to find himself floating over his body in a phantom duplicate. The experience lasted from about 15 to 20 seconds, he reported, and then he experienced a momentary blackout and awoke in his body. The same thing happened 2 months later as a result of a conscious attempt at astral projection. Upon going to bed, he willed himself to leave the body, but nothing happened. And then he awoke sometime later and immediately felt his body vibrating. He remained emotionless and then experienced his etheric leg, just the leg, raise out of his physical body and then back down again. This is a common experience, actually, more than you would think, where only parts of the body come out. His next experience came the next night when he had a full-blown release. He was about to fall asleep when the vibrations began, and this startled him back into a waking state. As he laid there motionless, he felt himself rising out of his body. At the moment, he writes, I felt an arm. This is kind of creepy, though. I felt an arm under my back, which was pulling me sideways, and I felt the bed cover slip. His first thought was that he was actually being carried out of bed. And then he realized he was having an out-of-body experience, which was somehow being aided by a disincarnate being. This is his quotations here. He said, he put me on my feet. And he put me on my feet to the left of the bed, a little way from the foot, and behind me with a hand on both shoulders. Paul's impression was that the friendly helper was keeping him from falling. Then he, or she, turned me to the right and pushed me gently, and I walked until I stood directly in front of the foot of my bed. Paul then blacked out and came back in his physical body. How do you know? How does that feel friendly, though? That's the thing. Like if I'm waking up or whatever and I feel someone's arm under me that I can't see, and then they start shoving me or pushing me, I don't know. Maybe he got a friendly, energetic vibe from it, but to me, that's creepy. But Rogo says this. He said, Paul's account is virtually identical to my own childhood experiences. I too felt as though the presence that accompanied me on my first OBEs was virtually carrying me. That is, carrying my etheric double through the house. And he was apparently spotting me the way one spots a weightlifter. And although my recollections are dim on the specific point, I do remember seeing this helper on at least one occasion. Paul had an identical experience 2 months later. Man, how do you know they're helpers, though? How do you know they're not like... Well, I guess if they were, dubious or whatever, if they, they would probably be doing other stuff besides supporting you or whatever. Paul had an identical experience as 2 months later. He woke to find himself standing in the hall in front of his bedroom. And at first he thought he had been sleepwalking, so he went back to his room. He experienced a bizarre sucking sensation as he approached his bed, though a vacuum were being formed around his bed. And this odd sensation alerted him to his out-of-body state. He was probably being pulled back to his body. That's what that sucking sensation is. The bedroom was dark, and so he sat down at the foot of his bed and actually felt his physical body there. And within a moment, he awoke in bed. The entire episodes, he said, lasted about 30 or 40 seconds. These OBs lasted for several months, during which time Paul diligently continued his mantra recitations. They apparently stopped when Paul ceased the exercise. Now, keep in mind, Paul's doing Kabbalistic exercises here. He's just doing the letter mantras in the Kabbalah. So Paul returned to his Kabbalistic practices 2 years later, curious as to whether he could induce OBEs by mentally reviewing the formulas instead of reciting them. And after 6 weeks of daily practice, he began having out-of-body experiences once again. They were primarily nocturnal experiences and would begin with a sense of bodily vibration. When these sensations arose, Paul would simply will himself out of the body, and this would cause him to float out of his body, usually coming to rest at the foot of his bed. These incidences were less prolonged and complex than his earlier ones, which Paul believes may have resulted from his purely mental use of the letter combinations. This, to me, though, is kind of like people that report UFOs. Like, there's so many people that report this stuff that it can't be BS. And obviously I personally have had the experience, so I know it's real. But I wonder, back in the early times when they wrote about this, 1906, 1920, even the 60s, how this was how people took it back then. We got enough people thinking we're schizophrenic and disassociative now, and it's 2024. I wonder how they were treated. It's interesting, however, to see the curious parallel that crops up in both Paul and Bayless's accounts, which also appear in Rogo's records. And note that Paul's out-of-body experiences occurred spontaneously after he went to bed. They didn't manifest as a direct result of any mantras themselves. Likewise, Bayless had his OB only after he had finished the pranayama exercises and was lying still. Rogo's first OBE also manifested spontaneously after he ceased consciously trying to induce them, so he just stopped trying. And despite the fact that we were using totally different induction methods, this curious release of effort phenomenon occurs in all three cases. This pattern may be telling us something very important about the ability to leave the body. And an occult explanation would be that many of the exercises used to induce leaving the body, visualization, diet, mantra sayings, breathing, all of these things somehow alter the structure of the etheric body or its relationship to the physical body. And this alteration may then lead to the spontaneous manifestation of OBEs. So the release of effort may, however, be explained psychologically. The various induction techniques we have been reviewing, as well as those that have been described in previous parts of this book, were simply to focus attention on the intent of having an OBE. They dynamize the will, as Lancelin would have said, and serve as perpetual unconscious suggestions that an OBE will indeed take place. And once the conscious mind has been removed from the task of willing the OBE, the release of effort allows the suggestion to work totally within the unconscious, which then orchestrates the experience. Now, what other experience do we know that works like that? Now, if this is the case, the release of effort phenomena is it's a very important aspect of astral projection. Its messages could be pretty simple. That is, our motivation to have an out-of-body experience and not the use of any particular system that actually grants us the ability to leave the body is what matters. What else do we know that works this way, though? Oh, well, magic, right? Magic works this way. You can do a sigil, charge a sigil, do a ceremony, do all kinds of different rituals or whatever, but it's not until you release it, until you actually stop, believe it or not, caring about it, is when it manifests. It's really strange. As soon as you let it go, that's when it manifests. And really let it go, not try to trick your mind or something like that. That's when it happens. So I'm not saying it's magic. Magic is just a word. I'm just saying fundamentally something's there like that. Because a lot of people are having OBEs, and I had my first OBE, like really vivid OBE, when I just didn't care. I mean, I wouldn't say it was like apathy where I just didn't care at all, but I guess I had tried for so long that I gave up on the idea of expecting a result. And at that very moment, it just happened, you know. So Rogo gets into the Monroe techniques. And most of the stuff that we talked about before this represent formal systems for the induction of out-of-body experiences designed for widespread and general use. But now we can start looking at some highly specific techniques developed by Robert Monroe, which he has found useful for his own projections. And every gifted subject, like Sylvan Muldoon to Keith Harary, has developed a unique method for leaving the body. Lucky for us, these methods have usually been placed on record. Now, the most popular and successful book ever wrote about the OBE appeared in 1971 when Robert Monroe, a Virginia businessman, published his autobiographical account, Journeys Out of the Body. Monroe, which was a white-haired executive, was born in 1915 and grew up in Lexington, Kentucky. He graduated from Ohio State University and worked first in New York's radio and television industry. And from there, he moved to advertising. He began experiencing OBEs in 1958, long after he had built a successful career. At first, he was confused by his newfound talent, but over the years, he became quite a frequent traveler along the astral byways. And his book describes not only his terrestrial out-of-body experiences, but his surrealistic journeys to parallel universes and other dimensions of time and space. And as he stated in a Fate magazine interview, he's even had certain remarkable experiences, such as visits to other energy systems that the I consciousness could not even conceive of. There's also been contact with entities that are far beyond anything I've ever dreamed of in my wildest fantasies. And according to his autobiography, this businessman developed his out-of-body talents as a result of an illness that struck him in the spring of 1958. His family went out for the day. He spent his time listening to a tape of specially prepared sounds. And after brunch with his family, when they returned, he decided to lie down and then was suddenly seized by cramps. His first thought was that he was suffering from food poisoning, so he stayed in bed all day and rested. The same thing happened 3 weeks later, but during this attack, his whole body began vibrating. And even though these weird vibrations continued to plague him for months, his family doctor could not diagnose the problem. One night, he was lying in bed with his arm draped over the side, dangling near the rug, when the vibrations began manifesting again. Monroe pushed on the floor, and if you guys have read the book, you remember this. He pushed on the floor, which is, I don't know. But he pushed on the floor, and his hand seemed to pass through it, and he was puzzled but shrugged off the experience as a daydream or something. The vibrations continued to manifest, though, and his first genuine OBE occurred a few weeks later. Now, he was just about to fall asleep when he felt a wave of vibration surge through his body. His thoughts instinctively turned towards gliding, which was his current hobby, and suddenly he found himself near the ceiling of his bedroom. This is what he says in his book. I was floating against the ceiling, bouncing gently with any movement I made, he wrote. I rolled in the air, startled, and looked down. And there in the dim light below me was the bed. There were 2 figures lying in the bed. To the right was my wife, and beside her was someone else. Both seemed asleep. It was, of course, his own figure lying there, but Monroe began to panic when he realized he might be dying. So he dove down back into his body. This experience puzzled Monroe, that he began consulting his doctor and a psychologist friend about his syndrome. This is what, when I was reading the book, this is what convinced me the most. This is what convinced me that there was something real to it, because the way he described how he reacted to these experiences is almost exactly what I would have done if I had no freaking clue what was going on. I mean, he went to his doctor. He went to several doctors, actually, but one of them was his friend. But that guy, the psychologist, recommended that he read up on Eastern philosophy. But even this didn't, get rid of Monroe's fear that he was going insane. He thought he was going crazy. Nor did it help much when more out-of-body experiences began manifesting over the next weeks. And these continued and eventually led him to the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute in 1964. So Monroe's at the time, you got to think, he's having a freaking breakdown. He's thinking, dude, I'm going crazy. He's dumping all kinds of money into these psychologists and psychiatrists trying to figure out what's wrong with him. Right? Now, they led him to the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute in 64, where he met with several of the staff in hopes of learning more about his problem. Man, wouldn't it be nice to have that kind of money? Like if, you have health issues, you could go talk to a whole panel of doctors and they could just focus on you. Monroe probably had some stupid money, didn't he? So they, of course, didn't know anything about the out-of-body experiences and so were hardly helpful. But luckily for him, he learned about parapsychology at the same time, which gave him a clue towards understanding his experiences. Man. Truly, what are you talking about, Doc? Truly, Joe, I have many mirrors in my flat and bells. Indeed, treaty badly in mental health, similar to quantum or old magic. Truly, Joe, you want a significant other female. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but a significant other female is a good thing for every guy, I would think. Do you mean as far as OBEs are concerned? Now so I know all of you haven't read this book, okay, but he started to fear his OBEs, but then he got to this place where he wasn't afraid of them anymore. So instead of dreading his OBEs, which the first part of his book, he was freaking out, honestly. But instead of dreading them, he began experimenting with them. And soon he learned that he could not only leave the body, but go to his friend's house and eventually he started doing this, even if they were miles away, and journeyed to parallel universes. He also began keeping detailed records of these incidents, complete with names of the people he had visited while out of body, what they were doing at the time of his visitations, and on subsequent verifications of his observations. His strange journeys also made him prone to some curious side effects. During the preliminary phases of his OBEs, he started having precognitive visions. His curiosity about the experience also brought him into contact with the scientific establishment, and he eventually took part in research projects both at the University of Virginia and the Topeka, Kansas Veterans Administration Hospital, where he tried to induce his OBEs under controlled conditions. Can you imagine that? But his chief concern, however, has been to develop means of leaving the body and exploring the new dimensions of reality that he has discovered through his experiences. And not only has he developed many personal techniques, but he opened his own institute for the development of more effective procedures. So at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia is the current home of the Monroe Institute for Applied Sciences, which opened in the early 1970s. Clients of the Institute can spend several days there, during which they undergo a training program in self-discovery, hopefully inducing a classic out-of-body experience. The sessions include sensory oscillation practice, auditory stimulation, and guided imagery. Remember, this book was written a while back, too. The work of Robert Monroe is therefore dichotomized. On one hand, he's interested in the experimental and scientific study of OBEs. And on the other, he, like Hugh Calloway and Marcel Louis Ferrand before him, has become fascinated with the occult side of the experience, which promises to teach us about a hidden dimension of the universe. Now, we all know that Monroe developed several methods for leaving the body based primarily on his own personal experiences. He revised these techniques considerably over the years, and the program currently taught at the Monroe Institute is very different from the methods he originally recommended in 1971 when his autobiography was published. So in January, the year I was born, 1982, a spokesperson for the Institute specifically told him that Monroe's original writings on out-of-body induction practices in 71 are now outmoded. And such a great difference exists between his autobiographical writings and his current week-long program that some description of each should be given. So we're going to go over the Monroe techniques. This is what Robert Monroe himself used to leave the body, and that, according to his own account, he used when he successfully produced his OBEs in the laboratory. Monroe clearly believes that the OBE is a human potential that we are all capable of developing. He has even written that, quote, the only possible way for an individual to appreciate the reality of the second body and existence within it is to experience it for him or herself. He adds, non-committally, however, that whether or not anyone should is beyond the scope of his judgment. Monroe contends that before actually attempting to leave the body, various a priori conditions must be met. Chief among these is the intense desire, here we go again, same thing, the intense desire to have an out-of-body experience, which is probably similar to what earlier writers referred to as the will. He also stresses that the experimenter must possess a certain degree of psychological strength. Don't have a weak mind, I guess. What would psychological strength be like? I guess just a balanced mind, I guess. Now, after first leaving the body, Monroe began having chronic OBEs. Somehow he had opened a door that he could no longer shut. But he advises the student that he or she must reckon with this same problem, because it might happen to you too once you open that door. Doc's saying, bro, please consider Monroe. See what? I'm not sure what you want me to consider. I'm kind of confused at what you're saying, honestly. You could always call in, man, What's up, Donovan? All right. Now, so Robert Monroe is basically saying that you have to have a strong will or desire to have an OBE. And two, once you have this, you might open a door that can never be shut again. I personally get excited when I hear stuff like that, but some people, I've realized, even today, some people don't want to open that door. And no matter how cool and fascinating you think the out-of-body experience is, like, some people just don't, they're afraid of it. They don't even want to go down that road, and that's okay. That's all right. But Monroe says he advises that you got to reckon with this. Once you induce an OBE, there's no turning back. And I believe that. If you have like a true OBE, you're never going to be the same again. You'll have to live with your decision to leave the body for the rest of your life. Your next problem will be dealing with your friends and relatives. And leaving the body is an ability that places you in a new relationship with the people around you. So you have to be willing to be labeled as a freak, insane, or merely some people calling you a liar. Some of your friends and relatives will not be willing to accept the validity of your experiences. They may smile in your face and say, oh, yeah, that's interesting, you know, that kind of thing. But deep down, they might think you're crazy, you know. You have to also be prepared for a certain amount of ostracism, right? So Monroe's warnings are well taken, especially when so many members of the general public are becoming interested in this. Hugh Calloway was an occultist, Sylvan Muldoon, a spiritualist, and Marcel Louis Ferrand, a mystic who lived in China for a good portion of his life. These men moved in social circles that were totally open-minded to claims of the paranormal. But that doesn't mean that you're going to find yourself in the same position. Take the case of the young hospital worker who developed rather remarkable psychokinetic abilities after months of self-development and practice. Her ability to move small objects through the power of thought was filmed, and 2 top American parapsychological laboratories documented her abilities. Yet, she eventually, think about this, she eventually renounced her gift. She had no problem handling this talent she had unleashed within herself, but she couldn't handle the reactions of her friends who were generally ignorant of parapsychology and held no belief in it. That's a damn sad thing, if you ask me. This isn't the Rogo's advice, but this is my advice. Stop giving a shit about what people think. High school is over. Do you know how, like, I understand it's uncomfortable being in social circles that don't accept you. I get it, but go find people that do. Like, do you understand how much it stunts your spiritual growth by giving a shit what other people think about you? How much, like, I don't want to go into this rant, but how much it keeps you from being truly happy or having real good relationships with the people that you deserve to have in your life. You're always going to settle for bullshit if you go down this road, and you'll never develop into the spiritual gifts that you should have in your life, that you deserve to have, much less the love that you deserve to have in your life if you're focused on what other people think. I don't know why it seems like people, like, I could care less, man. If I was able to move small objects with my mind, I'd be showing everybody. And if they thought I was a weirdo, so what? She renounced this because her friends thought she was a liar, or that she was pulling a sham, or was simply deluded, and they became very suspicious of her. They're not your friends, man, if those people do that. The emotional strain caused by this ostracism was too great, and finally the young woman ceased demonstrating her ability altogether. Today she lives an uneventful life in New York, where she works quietly as a hematology technician, and she takes little active interest in parapsychology. Well, you know, back then they probably didn't have podcasting and YouTube and blogs and things like that where you could express yourself. So, you know, I would say, like, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, all you had was your neighborhood and the people you grew up with. And if those people ostracized you, I mean, you might as well just move to another town. So I guess I get it, you know. But whatever. You know, like, I don't know. I still wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't give a shit. Even then, I don't think. This is all coming from Robert Monroe. He also warns that a hindering factor in the development of OBE abilities is the fear barrier. He talks about this quite a bit, the fear barrier. The student's own resistance to the experience. We all possess a certain inhibition about facing the unknown, and leaving the body is an experience we intuitively associate with either dying or going crazy. So we therefore have a natural fear of leaving the body, deeply ingrained in us by our culture and society. Monroe admits that his own fear barrier lasted for several years, and that only after he conquered it could he fully explore this out-of-body state and its potentials. It's just this barrier that keeps us in our bodies and represents the trickiest obstacle one must overcome before achieving the out-of-body experiences. Now, I don't know how to circumvent the fear barrier, is what Monroe says, except by cautious initial steps to create familiarity bit by bit as you proceed. Most of the great astral projectors of the past have written about something akin to this fear barrier. Ferran, in his particular notes, the instinctive dread he felt anytime something new and unexpected happened to him during his projections. Contacting a new dimension, confronting a disembodied entity for the first time, or having odd physical sensations all ignited this inherent trepidation. And gradually, however, he came to realize that the out-of-body experience world is primarily a mental one. Nothing could actually hurt him while he was out of body. It was his own fear that so often victimized him. He eventually discovered that he could change his environment and disperse any would-be astral attacker merely by an exercise of will. And once he learned this secret, he never again worried about his well-being while out of body. So, we know that Doc says he's got me on speed dial. Hell yeah, Doc. Did you call? Call into the show so I can understand what the hell you're saying. Because sometimes I'll read the comments and I take them out of context and I don't really know what's going on. So we got to pay the bills at the Fringe FM. We got a 3-4 minute break. Take time to go to the restroom. Whatever you got to do, you know, do it. Be right back. Don't go anywhere. We'll also pull the tarot table out if you guys want to do, I don't know, just a fun tarot reading here in the show. Stay with us.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
What is dedication?
I am the father of a 9-year-old little girl and a 6-year-old little boy, and I find fatherhood both relentlessly challenging and relentlessly rewarding. My daughter is biological and my son is adopted. I love them both so much, from the morning when you wake up to putting them to bed at night, and every moment in between. It really is so special, and boy, is it exhausting. One thing that I fear about being a parent is the future for my children. I think a parent's job is to protect our children, but also prepare them for the world so they become good, kind human beings. But I'm also hopeful that the future holds a more inclusive and compassionate world for them.
That's dedication. Find out more at fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You can say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat on the game, kick off your flip-flops. You can ask on your couch while you binge watch. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health. Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the JED Foundation.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
I wouldn't make it a habit calling me that, Fred.
Now, as we head on into the late night, we're here still talking about Robert Monroe, who, from my understanding, Robert Monroe liked to smoke cigarettes and eat cheeseburgers and talk about the OBE experience. I have an interview that a guy actually did with Robert Monroe who worked with him or under him or something. I want to play that on the air one night, but it's pretty interesting, just like, honestly, how normal of a guy he was. And yet, traveled to other dimensions, had OBE experiences. When all this stuff started happening to him, he thought he was crazy. We live in a different time now. Look, let's bring up the tarot table. Look, all right. This works just as good as any card deck, if you ask me. Donovan Wirtz is my kind of guy. All right. So, does anybody got a question we can ask the tarot table before we get going, before we continue our discussion on Rogo's text here? You could put it in the chat, or you can call in at 501-777-5631, which, if I miss your call, I'll call you back. I still can't get the damn ringer on this phone to work. I don't know why it doesn't work. But, let me know. You need a tarot reading. 2, make sure you go to also ltvpodcast.shop. You can join as a member there, just like you can on YouTube. You can support by donating, but you can support on Patreon. All of the same stuff at ltvpodcast.shop, except for some of the merch, is in the Patreon channel too as well. But if you go there, all of my downloads, audio downloads, hoodies. Speaking of which, someone just got a UFO hoodie the other day. I think I know who it's for. I think they bought it as a Christmas gift. So thank you. Thank you for your support. Appreciate that. All right, nobody. Just let me know if you want a tarot reading. We'll pull this tarot table back up. I love this thing, man, because all you got to do is hit the refresh button. What does MJ says? When will be the next time I can drive my car? Well, I've never seen anybody ask that kind of question for a tarot, but hey, we'll ask the tarot table. 3 cards, right? When's the next time MJ is going to be able to drive his car? Man, that don't look too bad as long as you don't get too... From what I'm seeing the Justice card. Looks like the 6 of Cups and the Emperor reversed, so whatever's happening with your car is actually fair and balanced, and as long as looks like there's some balanced give and take as far as money is concerned too, it's all meant in good from what I'm seeing, good intentions, good purposes, right? However, in the future, I would advise MJ not to get too loud and assertive about your car. Just let it happen. Be patient with it, and all will be well. What the hell happened to your car, man? That Campbell interview was a good one. Can I quit working next year? Dan Beard wants to know if he can quit working next year. Let's ask the tarot table that one. Boom. Do these rapid tarot readings real quick. Looks like you've, in the past, you've given, a give and take has been good too. It's been balanced as far as the emotions are concerned. And now it looks like you're ready to follow whatever you're passionate about. You're ready to dive into the wheel and see what it's going to do. But maybe you got to get out of your head about it, because you need to move on into some peaceful waters in the mind, so to speak. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you're afraid of that. Maybe you're afraid of not having the mental stability that you have now, man. Maybe you should just quit and see what happens next year, right? Because the 6 of Swords reversed, swords represent air, which represents like communication and thought and things like that. And the 6s represent Tifereth, which is like ultimate balance, So in my mind, the 6 of Swords represents a peace of mind. And if I see it reversed, maybe following your passions might not give you that peace of mind that you've had. I don't know. But that's really all up to you, Stop wanting to drive your car and you'll drive it. Right. That's kind of hard though, man, because I've, thanks to the Domex, I have a car now. But before, when I didn't have a car, it sucked. When I wrecked my car in Florida, that sucked. So I understand it's hard not having even if you live in the city and you can like metro everywhere, walk, whatever, not having a vehicle, that's a hard place to be in, right? Got a voicemail, bro? Got a voicemail. Oh, a voicemail. Gotcha. Well, I can call you back. See, I haven't got the ringer here. I'll call you back. I haven't got the ringer to work, dude. So it doesn't work in my ear very well. Just pick up. How about that? I'll get it to work. Calling you back, though. I feel like we're dialing for dollars here. Pick up. Yeah, what's up, man? Who's this? Is this the doc? Make sure you turn off your radio because it's confusing. Or your phone or whatever. Yeah, it's delayed. It's confusing.
To work.
Yeah.
Oh, calling you back, then.
Turn it off. Turn off your radio.
Okay, Joe, I just disconnected my other device.
Cool. What's on your
Can you
mind?
pull
What's up?
card on me?
Yeah, man. Who am I speaking with first and foremost?
Pardon?
Who am I speaking with first and foremost?
This is the doctor, man.
What's up, Doc?
Scott, actually. Just call me Scott.
All right, what's up? You want me to pull some tarot
bro,
cards for you?
I just want a card. My birthday is 10/1/1958. I love the new moon readings and all that. Your show is like truly awesome, and sometimes I miss it, but I try to catch it when I can.
Right. Got a voicemail, bro. Like, yeah, all right, here we go. I can pull some cards for you. Man.
Thanks, bro.
Well, on the tarot table, you got 10 of Pentacles reversed, Ace of Swords reversed, and 3 of Wands reversed, man. That looks like a lot of destabilization and turmoil and not knowing where to go. What if I pull my... Let me try something else.
Okay.
Because that don't sound... that don't sound right.
Well, you know what? I mean, things aren't really going that great. So it might resonate.
Yeah. Well, that's what the tarot table's showing, but this is a technological tarot table. So maybe I feel bad about the reading on here, but yeah, I mean, that's what it shows is the 10 of Pentacles reversed, not,
You gotta be real, man.
Yeah, not real stability in your past, maybe some solid indecisiveness about what to do and where to go in the future about it, That's what I see. But
hey, fuck. Excuse my language.
No, it's all right. We're on the internet, man. Curse away.
No, I wouldn't do that.
I do. Shit.
What else you got, bro? You got something else for me?
Yeah, let's see. Let's pull a card from my actual deck. This is a brand new deck because my other ones are yeah, so look, we've been getting this card a lot tonight.
I really appreciate this.
Can you see that? Because of the green screen? 6 of Cups. Can't really see it because of the green screen. But I got the 6 of Cups for you, man. And that card's been pulled tonight quite a bit. So the 6 of Cups just is reminding you always to make sure that you give and receive from the heart in everything that you do. It'll probably have your answers to all of your questions as long as you do it from the heart, right? Everything that you do, whether it's what you give or receive, should come from your emotional center, which is your heart. First and foremost, not from your mind or not from how it's going to benefit you financially or materially. First and foremost, from the heart. And that should dig you out of whatever issues you're in, I know that's kind of vague, but that's how I see the 6 of Cups.
Yeah, man, you're right on. Thank you. I totally vibe with that. Thank you.
Hey,
man.
What were you saying in the chat earlier? You were saying something about... what did you say earlier? I have to go back and read it. Joe, you want a significant other female, similar to quantum?
Joe, I'm just going to tell you how I feel from my heart. You really like being with a girl, all right? A girl that, fulfills your life, all right? And that's just what I'm catching, from all the, previous things I've viewed and all that. And you're not getting that girl, and I hope you get her.
Yeah, me too.
Or she gets you, or what?
Yeah. Well, I think I have a lot of Libra in my chart, man. I've got Libra. I've got 3 or 4 different Libra placements in my chart. So I love connection, right? I love relationships and connection. But what I've learned at 42 years old is that self-love and the relationship that we have with ourselves is super important, and that it's okay to be I don't want to say picky, but not to settle for things that aren't good for you or that don't hurt you. And it's taken me 42 years to figure that out. Just because we don't want to be alone doesn't mean we should rush into something that's terrible for us, which is something that I've done personally, right? It's okay to take some time, sit back, and wait for the right thing,
Joe, I totally agree with you. I'm 66 years young here. Punxsutawney, and I'm not meeting the right girl yet myself. So just take your time, young man.
Yeah, I will, Doc. I appreciate or Scott, I appreciate your advice, man. Thanks.
Love you, man.
Love you too, brother. Thanks for calling. I think that's the first time Doc's ever called in. That's cool. What's up, PK? So before we were talking about, by the way, I do that tarot table on my gaming channel, but I do it in a different voice. I have more like fun on the gaming channel, like we play characters and stuff, but it's a little less serious. But all right, so before we were talking about Monroe, right? And how he talked about how you should get rid of your fear barrier. But a good lesson to learn before you try leaving the body for practical purposes. You should diligently study the literature on OBEs before trying to project. So the writings of the great astral projectors of yesteryear are especially good in this regard. Muldoon, not Muldoon, but Muldoon, I think is one of my favorites now. And they'll prepare you for what you may experience while separated from your body. And this is what Rogo said. He said, had I known what to do today about the out-of-body experiences, I do not think I would have been so uneasy about some of his initial experiences, such as the paralysis or the feeling of being sucked out of his body against his will, or the vicious white faces he saw during one of his first incipient releases and other encounters I had on the road to self-discovery. Holy shit, man. Let me tell you guys something. Do you remember me telling you guys about that false awakening that I got caught in? The false awakening that, you know what a false awakening is, that you think you're awake, but you're not. And then, so I would shake my eyes and like shake to try to wake myself up. Now, woke myself up again, thought I was awake, but I wasn't. I looked at my phone, which is something we naturally do nowadays. We wake up, we reach for the phone, we look at it, and I would try to turn it on and it wouldn't come on. So this is how I figured out that, oh shit, I'm still not awake. I went through this cycle 4 times. Thought I was awake, wasn't awake. Thought I was awake, wasn't awake. And it started freaking me out. Like I thought, oh crap, man, I'm stuck in this loop where I'm not going to be able to wake up. And on the 4th time, I was laying on the couch when this happened, by the way. But on the 4th time, I kind of felt like something was hovering over me, And so, you know how when you're laying on your back, you could kind of just stretch your neck. So I just stretched my neck and look above me like that. And there was this face, and I only saw this much of the face, like from here up. Okay. So there was this face with a hood, and the face of this thing that was hovering over me was white. It had like a white face, and it freaked me out so much when I saw it. I kind of like jerked my head over to the right, and I was like, oh, Jesus. I started praying, because it freaked me out so much. And I remember vibrating like Yeshua, but in a longer vibration. And then when it moved away from me, it felt like I could feel it moving away from me, almost like I've described this before, like when you're in a swimming pool and somebody goes by you underwater. That's what it felt like. And it was kind of choppy when he moved away. Then I woke up. So my instincts are telling me that this thing was like one of these entities that Rogo's talking about in the astral realm. And I think it was just, honestly don't think it was that evil or whatever. I just think it was messing with me. Like perhaps it was trying to keep me asleep or something. Hell, I don't know. But listening to Rogo talk about these entities with white faces, it just immediately reminded me of that experience. So, yeah, the paralysis, the feeling of being sucked out of his body against his will, the vicious white faces he saw during one of his first releases, and other encounters that he had on the road to self-discovery. Having psychologically prepared yourself for leaving the body, the steps described below may be implemented for inducing the experience. According to Monroe, you have to relax the body. The ability to relax is the first prerequisite, perhaps the first step to having an OBE. This induces both mental and physical relaxation, although Monroe offers no specific exercises for relaxation. He doesn't really do. He just says relax, Step 2, try to enter the state bordering sleep. So you try to get yourself to the hypnagogic state. And nearly all the great astral projectors have noted that the OBE seems related to that curious state right between waking and sleeping, which is known as the hypnagogic state. Dr. John Palmer found that this subject at the University of Virginia who could enter an experimentally induced analog of the state through Ganzfeld simulation, where the most successful, was the most successful at experiencing the OBEs. What the hell is a Ganzfeld simulation? I have to look at that. The same finding has been made experimentally, primarily by Sylvan Muldoon and Monroe. Just how does one achieve this state voluntarily? Because it's not easy just to say, oh, I'm going to get myself in the hypnagogic state. It's never been easy to do that. You either stay awake or you fall asleep. It's hard to ride that edge in there, you know. And the only way is through practice. So when you lie down to sleep, observe the act of falling asleep as you fall asleep. Just observe yourself falling asleep at first, you know. And as you begin to doze off, try to hold your consciousness intact. At first, you're going to lose your grip and you're going to fall asleep. You just are. But don't be discouraged. Eventually, you'll be able to instinctively to judge when you're beginning to fall asleep. And these cues will allow you to hold on to this twilight zone of consciousness indefinitely. You can also use certain exercises to identify the hypnagogic state. Here's a relatively simple one. When you lie down to sleep, hold a single mental image in your mind as long as you can. When other images start popping spontaneously into your mind, now you've entered into the hypnagogic state. Learn to observe these images and passively study them. And this process of observation will actually keep you awake, since the mind will be kept minimally stimulated but not actually aroused. I've used this technique for years and have trained myself to observe these images, rouse myself, write them down, and then almost immediately return to the hypnagogic state. It is indeed all a matter of practice. Another old method of prolonging the hypnagogic state is to rest with your arm bent at the elbow and elevated. When you're just about to fall asleep, your arm will begin to fall and will alert you to the fact. Again, with practice, you'll eventually be able to hold the state right between waking and sleeping for a considerable amount of time. But the key isn't to hold it, it's to simply become aware of it. Monroe does not call this state by its former psychological name, he simply calls it Condition A. Now here's step 3. So relaxation, step 1. Get into the hypnagogic state, step 2. Step 3 is deepen the state. Monroe advises the student to learn how to deepen the hypnagogic state as a prerequisite to leaving the body. The first exercise is to learn how to clear the mind while remaining near sleep. Don't think of anything, but remain posed between wakefulness and sleep, he advises. Simply look through your closed eyelids at the blackness ahead of you. Don't do anything else. And after a number of these exercises, you may hallucinate, like you might see mind pictures or light patterns. These seem to have no great significance and may merely be forms of neural discharge, but when these images cease, one has entered in what Monroe calls Condition B. And from here, one must learn to enter even deeper into Condition C, which is a state of relaxation that one loses all awareness of the body and sensory stimulation. You're almost in a void in which your only source of stimulation will be your own thoughts. So your body just shuts off. Okay. The ideal state for leaving the body, however, is Condition D. And this is the same as Condition C, when it's voluntarily induced from a rested and refreshed condition and is not the result of the normal fatigue that brings on sleep. To achieve Condition D, Monroe suggests that you practice entering it after you wake up in the morning or after a short nap. At that point, you're refreshed, but still physically and mentally relaxed, and start the exercise before you begin moving out. Now, although Monroe may disagree with Rogo on this point, what he calls Condition C and D may actually represent the first stages of actual sleep. It's just hard to judge when a person slips from waking into sleep. Subjects that were hooked to an EEG so that their brain waves can be monitored do not show a discrete changeover from a drowsy condition into sleep. The shift is very gradual. Individuals aroused during their initial light sleep may not even be aware that they have fallen under, and they usually describe being preoccupied with their thoughts and do not recollect actually losing consciousness. Monroe seems to be teaching his students how to actually observe the process of waking into sleeping with no loss of consciousness. And psychologists now know that even when we're not dreaming, our minds are occupied in constant mentation. So Monroe's techniques may also be a systematic method for retaining some awareness of one's thought processes during actual sleep onset. Now, after you do step 1, 2, and 3, relax, right? Get into the hypnagogic state, deepen the hypnagogic state. Step 4 is enter into a state of vibration. And now, this is the most important part of Monroe's techniques, but it's also the most opaque. Many people who've undergone an out-of-body experience have noted the curious vibrations that herald its onset. These vibrations can manifest in a variety of amplitudes, from a mild tingling sensation to the feeling that electricity is being shot through the body. Monroe experienced them for several weeks before having his first separation, yet their cause remains a mystery, and they may indeed be caused by the actual incipient release of the psychic double, or they might be the result of some sort of proprioceptive stimulation produced when one's normal body awareness is totally eliminated. Robert Monroe does not claim that he knows what causes these curious vibrations, but he feels that producing them deliberately is the most critical step of all in inducing the OBE. For entering to this vibrational state as an adjunct to condition D, he says this. Number 1, remove any and all jewelry or other stuff that might be touching your skin. Number 2, darken the room so that no light can be seen through your eyelids, but don't shut out all the light. Number 3, lie down with your body along a north and south axis with your head pointed towards magnetic north, but he doesn't really say why. Number 4, loosen all clothing but keep covered so that you are slightly warmer than might normally be comfortable. Number 5, be sure you're in a location where and at a time when there will be absolutely no noise to disturb you. 6, enter into a state of, guess what? Deep relaxation. 7, give yourself the mental suggestion that you will remember that all the stuff that's going to occur during the upcoming session that will be beneficial to your well-being. Repeat this suggestion 5 times. Number 8, proceed to breathe through your half-opened mouth. Number 9, as you breathe, concentrate on the void in front of you. And number 10, select a point a foot away from your forehead, then change your point of mental reference to 6 feet. And number 11, turn that point 90 degrees upwards by drawing an imaginary line parallel to your body axis up and above your head. Focus there and reach out for the vibrations, and at that point, bring them back into your body. And I remember reading the book, he doesn't really explain, what the hell reach actually means. Reach out with what is what he says in the book. And he goes on to try to explain it too, but it's kind of hard to explain. So the only way to understand the vibrations is to experience them. And another way of making contact with the vibrations is by imagining that 2 lines are extending from your closed eyes and converging about a foot or so away from your forehead. At the point where these 2 lines meet, try to experience a resistance of pressure. So you might imagine something like the sensation that would be experienced if poles of a magnet were forced together or if 2 electrical wires made contact. Proceed by extending this focal point about 3 feet away from you. As Monroe explains, quote, a compression of space or forces between the converging lines must result, and the pressure must therefore increase to maintain the convergence. That's so weird. That has to do something. I bet you that has something to do with the third eye. Has to. He goes on to suggest that you now extend the junction another 3 feet away so that it rests about a 30-degree angle from your head. Then Monroe suggests you even work out this angle with a protractor so that you can visualize it correctly. And once, he continues, you have learned to establish and maintain the 30-degree angle outward or roughly 6 feet away, send the point of intersection 90 degrees or in an L upward in direction of your head, but parallel to the axis of your body. You reach with this point of intersection, stretch or reach with the point more and more until you obtain a reaction. Monroe asserts that you will know when a reaction has been reached. You will experience it as a surging or a hissing or a pulsation inside the head. The vibrations will then surge through the entire body. These are preliminary exercises, and Monroe assures the student that after due practice, he or she will be able to enter the state of vibration at will. Step 5. Learn to control the vibration. Now, after learning how to achieve this state, you must now begin exploring its many subtleties. Practice inducing the vibrations until you're no longer scared by the waves or the electrical feelings that accompany them. Monroe also suggests that you relax and passively observe these vibrations until they are familiar to you. At the time, you should practice controlling them by mentally pushing them into your head, down into your toes, making them surge throughout your entire body and creating vibrational waves from head to foot. To produce this wave effect, concentrate on the vibrations and mentally push a wave out of the head and guide it down the body. Practice this procedure until you can induce these waves instantly on mental command. And if the vibrations seem rough or shaky, remember that Bayliss felt as if the body was being shook by an earthquake. So Monroe recommends that you mentally increase the vibrational rate, and this will even them out. Which kind of makes sense, right? Because if you feel like you're swaying like in an earthquake, then the waves or the frequencies probably at lower. So if you turn up the frequency and you got more waves, it should even out into just a vibration instead of like a swaying earthquake or whatever. Now, once you have control of the vibrational state, you're ready to actually leave the body. Step 6, begin with a partial separation. The key here is thought control, and keep your mind firmly focused on the idea of leaving the body. Do not let it wander. Stray thoughts may cause you to lose control of this state. Now, having entered the vibrational state, begin exploring the out-of-body experience by releasing a hand or a leg out of the second body. Monroe suggests that you stick your hand out as far as you can and touch a familiar object, such as a wall next to your bed. Then push a little more and allow your extremity to go through the object. Return the hand by placing it back into coincidence with your physical body, decrease your vibrational rate, and then terminate the experiment. Lie quietly until you have fully returned to normal, and this exercise will prepare you for completely leaving the body. Number 7, disassociate yourself from the body. Monroe describes 2 basic techniques for implementing this ultimate separation, and one method is to lift out of the body. So to do so, think about getting lighter and lighter, and after you've entered the vibrational state, think how nice it would be to float upwards. Keep this thought in mind at all costs and let no extraneous thoughts interrupt it, and an OBE will occur naturally at this point. Another method Monroe uses for leaving the body is the rotation method or the rollout technique, and this is what I used. When you have achieved the vibrational state, try to roll over as if you were turning over in bed. Do not attempt to turn over physically by moving your arms or legs. Just try to twist your body from the top and virtually roll over in your second body right out of your physical self. At this point, you'll be out of body, but next to it. Now think of floating upward, and you should find yourself floating above your body. Monroe recommends beginning with the lift-out method, but argues that both procedures will be equally effective for inducing a total separation. Monroe also offered several suggestions for experiments and exercises that you may wish to try once you've left the body, and these experiments will not concern us here, but Monroe's book may be consulted for further details. It also suggested that one should become familiar with the feeling of being out of body before making any further explorations. During the first trials, the student should not attempt to leave the room in which he or she is projecting. Dude, yeah. Well, I didn't roll over. I just set up. I did the kind of like the pull-up method, but I did kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I just kept the inertia going, right? Like I set up, it's like sitting up on the couch is what I did, except I didn't push my hands down. I basically was like laying on the couch listening to, the HemiSync tapes, and I let the vibrations happen, and then the vibrations peaked, and then as they slowly started to go down, because I've gotten to the vibratory state 3 or 4 times, and I try to get out when they were peaking, and it wouldn't happen. So this time I let them peak, and then I kind of let them die down just a little, and then I started to just sit up, and it felt like I was just sitting up on the couch. But I also made sure that I never stopped. You know how you could especially if you're in a sticky couch or something and you try to sit up and you get kind of stuck and you're like, shit. And then you have to readjust and push yourself one way or the other just to get up. So I made sure that didn't happen. I made sure that I just kept moving, the inertia kept going, so to speak. But it did not feel any different than sitting up in my body. If I just sat up in my body. That's how I did it. But that would be more, I'm just saying, that would be more akin to rolling and twisting than actually lifting up, because I only lifted up for a second, and then I started kind of twisting myself up, So when evaluating the Monroe techniques, the main thing to keep in mind is that these are personal procedures. Monroe developed them from his own experiences, and they may work for him, but they may not necessarily work for anybody else. His assurances about the universal viability of the rollout method is a good case in point. My own out-of-body experiences are usually heralded by what Monroe calls the vibrational state, although this state usually manifests itself spontaneously. I have little control over it and often have difficulty getting out of body at this point. Yeah, me too. This is especially true if I can't focus my concentration long enough on the feeling of being fully separated from my body. Sometimes I'll even get halfway out, but remain partially stuck back in the physical. Yeah, me too. Once I got stuck with my head and upper torso out of the body, but with the rest of me from the waist down, fully coincident with my physical self. That exact same thing happened to me. The next day I woke up with a slender line of pain around my waist where the juncture had existed. That didn't happen to me. I found out that the best way to leave the body at this point was a lift-out procedure, although I made this discovery long before Monroe published his autobiography. After reading Journeys Out of the Body, however, I tried experimenting with the rollout procedure, but I never had any luck with it. I have, indeed, felt the curious sensation of actually rolling over and over within my body, but I never was able to actually roll out. The message here is simple. What holds true for one person will not necessarily hold true for everyone. Leaving the body is a very personal matter, and individual differences obviously play an important part in developing this skill. On the other hand, one of the main virtues of Monroe's techniques is the concentration on the vibrational state. This state is universally described by astral projectors, yet no one has ever written anything about its nature or how to induce it. John Palmer attempted to imitate this sensation during his University of Virginia project. He had his volunteer subjects try to induce out-of-body experiences while they sat in a vibrating chair and had some success with the procedure, yet even this work reveals nothing about why or how these vibrations are linked to the OBE. Monroe's writings on the subject are therefore potentially very important, but it is here, unfortunately, that the Monroe techniques become rather obscure. His elaborate method of reaching out and mentally grabbing vibrations from the air seems arbitrary and without any coherent rationale. But the real question at the issue is rather simple. Has Monroe actually been able to induce OBEs through his own methods? He has participated in at least 2 major experimental projects during which his OBEs have been monitored under controlled conditions. These tests were conducted at the University of Virginia by Dr. Charles Tart and at the Topeka, Virginia Hospital by Dr. Stuart Twemlow and Fowler Jones, who recently initiated an ambitious research program into the nature of the out-of-body experience. The results of these experiments are crucial in judging Monroe's credibility, more so since he later bowed out under highly suspicious circumstances of a similar experiment scheduled at the University of Virginia in the early 1970s. I did not know that. So Monroe bowed out of an experiment. on one occasion. Dr. Tart initiated his tests after he met Robert Monroe in 1965. Tart was a psychologist at the University of Virginia at the time and had access to a psychophysiology laboratory at the University Hospital. Monroe participated in 9 experiments from December of 1965 to August of 1966. The tests were basically all run the same way. Monroe was placed in a room of the lab that was equipped with a cot where he could lie down and spend the night. Electrodes were attached to his head and chest, which led to a polygraph in an adjoining equipment room where Tart, or an assistant, could monitor his brain waves, heartbeat, and other physiological functions. Monroe was merely requested to settle down to sleep, leave the body, float out of the sleep chamber, and into the equipment room. A 5-digit number was placed on a shelf located there. His next task was to look at the number, return to his body, and report the number back to the experimenters. That probably didn't go too well because things get a little distorted. He probably saw it. Let's see what happened. Although Monroe was never able to succeed at this experiment, there were some surprises in store for everybody. During his 8th night at the lab, Monroe managed to induce 2 out-of-body experiences, and after settling down, he was able to roll out of his body, float near his coat, and leave the sleep chamber. He found himself in an unknown room, presumably in the hospital, where 2 people were talking. When he found out that he could not attract their attention, he returned to his body. Returning to the sleep chamber helped to orientate him, and he initiated a second out-of-body experience. But this time, he left the sleep chamber and entered the equipment room, but he was surprised to see that no one was there. He searched around a bit and found Dr. Tart's assistants in the corridor talking to a man. Monroe tried to get their attention, and the assistant seemed to respond, but he was not able to get the man's attention, however, so he once again returned to his body. Monroe later learned that his observations had been correct. Tart's assistant had left the room at one point during the experiment when her husband had called on her. She had gone out into the corridor to talk to him. Holy shit, so he saw her. He went to the equipment room, said nobody was there, went out to the hallway and saw her talking to her husband. Now, while working at the University of California at Davis, Tart met and worked with another subject who eventually succeeded at this experiment, just as a side note. Now, Dr. Tart was also intrigued by Monroe's psychophysiology. His out-of-body experiences appeared to manifest during a poorly defined dream state. When Tart moved to the University of California at Davis, work with Monroe was resumed. The psychologist managed to get Monroe there for only one night in 1968. I had no idea this was happening. This test was designed along similar lines to the Virginia project. Monroe spent the night in a university lab room equipped with a comfortable bed and a polygraph leads again. He was able to induce an out-of-body experience that night, but could not manage to get into the adjoining room where a target number had been placed on a shelf. He apparently got lost after leaving the body, traveled in the wrong direction, and ended up in a courtyard next to the lab. When he realized that he had lost his way, he returned to the body. The experiment was technically a failure, but Monroe was able to correctly describe the courtyard nonetheless, although he had never visited it before. The readouts on his psychophysiology were also interesting. The OBE had occurred during an initial sleep state marked by a sudden drop in his blood pressure. The records indicated that he was not dreaming, however. Tart also designed some tests to see if Monroe could project from Virginia to his own residence in Berkeley. The results were inconclusive. Monroe later submitted to tests at the Topeka VA Hospital in Kansas, and there his OBE talents were studied by Stuart Twemlow and Fowler Jones. The crux of the project was to assess Monroe's personality profile in hope of finding any clues that might relate to his out-of-body experiences. The doctors were also able to run a few psychophysiological tests with their subject. Monroe was placed in one room of the hospital's psychophysiology lab where he was instructed to induce an OBE and then signal the experimenters over an intercom upon his return. A technician was stationed in the adjoining room to monitor the equipment, while Twemlow and Jones watched Monroe through a one-way window from yet a third location. When Monroe began inducing his out-of-body experiences, they were in for quite a surprise. Here's a quote. At about the same time as the technician entered the room to tell us that the brainwave tracings were changing, writes Twemlow, Dr. Jones and I simultaneously had the impression of a heat wave distortion of Monroe's upper body, while the lower part of his body was clearly in focus to us. The distortion lasted until approximately 2 minutes before the termination of the experiment. The researchers later learned that Monroe's self-reported OBE coincided with the observable changes in his brainwave readings. In general, the Kansas researchers found that Monroe's OBEs were accompanied by a rather discrete brain state in which his brainwave slowed down and became less varied. They also maintain that Monroe was actually able to alter his brain state into a narrow frequency band in order to leave the body. All these tests and data are certainly suggestive, but this is not to say that Monroe's credibility is unimpeachable. Strong experimental evidence certainly does exist to show that he can leave the body, but many of Monroe's other claims remain somewhat questionable. In his autobiography, for instance, Monroe claims that his initial OBEs were related to curious attacks of cramps and vibrations, yet several years earlier he had written an account of his experiences under the pseudonym, damn, I didn't know this, under the pseudonym of Bob Remy. This was published in 1962 by Dr. Andrija Purovich, a maverick researcher from California, as a chapter in his book Beyond Telepathy. Most of the accounts Monroe's and Remy are identical, except that in his Remy accounts, it's spelled R-A-M, so maybe it's Rame. Monroe admits that his first OBEs were deliberately induced by glue sniffing. What? Perhaps Monroe simply did not wish to do anything to promote this dangerous practice when he set about his book, but little was known about glue sniffing in the 1950s. But Monroe was not too wise to leave this discrepancy in print. Holy shit. What if Robert Monroe was sniffing glue? Like, I'm not saying that's real, but this dude's saying, like, this is crazy. All right, let's stop here just for a second. So according to Rogue, whatever his name is, Rogo, R-O-G-O. There was a book written by, we need to look this up. It was published in 1962 by Andrija Purovich. She was maybe it's a guy, I don't know, a maverick researcher from California. And there's a chapter in that book called Beyond Telepathy. There's a person in that book called Bob Rame, R-A-M-E. And all of the accounts line up exactly as Monroe wrote about in his books, except for sniffing glue. So maybe Robert Monroe didn't wish to do anything to promote sniffing glue. Little was known about glue sniffing in the 1950s, but Monroe was not too wise to leave this discrepancy in print. That's if this Bob R-A-M-E dude is Monroe, but I need to read the books, because if I read the book and see if I can find this text, I'll know if it's Robert Monroe or not, because I've studied this shit till the cows come home. All right, so now Robert Monroe's credibility has also been more seriously questioned when David Black, an investigative reporter from the East, decided to check up on journeys out of the body in 1973. Black could not locate any of the people Monroe mentions in his book who could corroborate his OBE visitations, and he found the Virginia businessman evasive when he questioned him about the matter. My own opinion is that Monroe probably does have the ability to leave his body, but has exaggerated and romanticized his accounts. That is always a possibility. Look, in my experience, lots of people do that. They'll have like a mystical thing that happens to them, or some kind of thing that happens, right? Whether it's like a Sasquatch experience, an out-of-body experience, a UFO experience, something, okay? And it's cool. Whatever it is, it's cool. But then they'll add on to it things that aren't true, to make it more I don't know, fanatical for some reason. And I have no idea why people do this, but they do this, you know. His writings about the OBE certainly contain much understanding and insight about the experience, leading me to believe that he has much personal knowledge of it, but how much and to what extent must remain a mystery. The fact that Monroe's first OBEs were induced by glue sniffing should not detract from the validity of his experiences, however. Artificial means for leaving the body are numerous, and people who have experimented with marijuana, LSD, MDA have reported spontaneous OBEs, and there seems no reason not to take these accounts at face value. However, one must remember that OBE induction methods Monroe outlines were developed by someone who had already induced the experiences via a very different and potentially dangerous means. They may therefore be suited for someone who has already had a few previous OBEs than for someone wishing to develop the skill from scratch. Apart from his personal techniques, Robert Monroe founded and opened his own institute in the 1970s to help the general public explore the OBE state. His institute is located in Faber, Virginia, where workshops are held and new methods of self-exploration are being developed. The basic goal of the Institute is to help the client explore his or her inner self. It is not focused on the OBE per se, although the induction of an OBE is part of the overall program taught there. A client who enrolls in the Gateway program, the featured attraction, spends a week at the centered headquarters. The program includes several sessions and an isolation booth where he or she is fitted with a headset and listens to specifically prepared tapes. And there are tape procedures for relaxation, control of the body's energy systems, exploring alternate realities, and experiencing the OBE. The aim of these tapes, a mixture of pulsating wave sounds and verbal instructions, is to synchronize the hemispheres of the brain. The brain, divided into two hemispheres, each in charge of certain functions. And it's generally maintained that the left controls logic and analytical functions, while the right regulates spatial and aesthetic tasks. Each hemisphere puts out a continuous series of electrical impulses which can be monitored by an EEG. It is quite normal for the two hemispheres to be out of synchronization. Monroe and the Institute claim that their tapes synchronize the electrical activity of the hemispheres, allowing the client to explore his or her inner self more easily and without resistance from the brain. This, of course, only a very brief and cursory summary of the Institute's program. Whether it actually works is a different matter. Dude, I got to roll out of here, but no, let's finish this. We're almost done with this. Hold on. Hold the phone. Now, some people obviously benefit greatly from the program. One prominent supporter is Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the well-known authority on death and dying, who visited the Institute in hopes of experiencing an OBE. She wanted to know what it actually felt like to die or leave the body so that she could better understand her fatally ill patients. Her enthusiastic endorsement of the Institute appeared as a part of a February 1980 Cosmopolitan magazine interview. So not only did Kubler-Ross have a classic OBE during one of her sessions, but after another of her sessions underwent what psychologists call a peak experience, where one seems joyfully to merge with all of creation. Dr. Kubler-Ross certainly is not alone in her enthusiasm. Writing in a recent issue of Fate magazine, former California TV writer James Bryce tells of his own awesome reactions to the Gateway program. He apparently did not have an OBE during his stay, but reminds his reader that participation in a Monroe Institute seminar should not be considered if your main goal is to have an OBE. That's not what the program's about. It's about changing your views of reality to such a degree that you no longer merely wonder about those special extra senses, but begin to use them in a way that improves your life. He adds that the research at the Institute has provided a tool which allows people to explore the outer reaches of consciousness and bring back information and guidance to enhance their personal lives and to help create their own reality. Bryce does not mention, however, that the OBE is an integral part of the Institute's concentration. A tape meant to help the client explore the out-of-body experience is even included in the guidance manual sent to people preparing to participate in one of the programs. A bulletin sent to me from the Monroe Institute goes on to stress that the purpose of the Gateway program is to, in part, quote, achieve and willfully control his physical body and out-of-body state, communicate with and visit other energy structures and realities. So, the Gateway experience must be considered essentially an out-of-body induction procedure. Should the Institute Gateways program be considered a particularly viable approach to explore the out-of-body experience? That's the question. Despite the enthusiastic support of Kübler-Ross and other, several criticisms could be leveled at the Institute and its programs. Although the center offers a wide variety of programs and activities, it often displays a very naive understanding of psychophysiology and psychobiology. A small booklet distributed by the center and entitled Brain Power points out the differences between the functions of the brain's hemisphere, but fails to mention that discrete lateralization functions generally hold true only for right-handed individuals, not for many left-handers. Nor is there any reason to believe that the HemiSync tapes can really help induce the out-of-body experience. Several successful attempts have been made to monitor the brainwaves of people undergoing the OBE, and the data obtained from these studies do not indicate that hemispheric synchronization is a consistent or even indicative feature of the experience, nor is everybody who goes through the program invariably pleased with it. Keith Harary himself, a gifted OBE subject, underwent an earlier version of the current program and considered it useless as a viable approach to the out-of-body experience. And I once received a letter from a couple who had taken the Gateway program and who felt that they had been ripped off by the Institute. Since I was a consulting editor from a nationwide psychic magazine, they were writing to me, they explained, in the hope that I could advise them how they could best warn the public against what they considered consumer fraud. Since I've never gone through the Gateway program and do not plan to, I can neither recommend nor criticize it. It appears obvious that the procedures used there, as with all of the techniques outlined in this book, will work for some individuals but not for others. One's sensitivity to altered states of consciousness, willingness, and readiness to have an OBE, and previous experiences with self-exploration techniques will all play a role in how one reacts to the Gateway program. None of the literature I've seen from the Institute guarantees that the client will have an OBE just by taking part in the program. So Monroe and his staff are certainly not guilty of false advertising or super hype. Yet, it seems to me that there are simpler and cheaper ways of getting to the heart of an out-of-body experience. Participation in an Institute program is not exactly inexpensive, and a membership in the Institute costs $155, of which $60 may be deducted from the registration fees for any one of their programs. Taped programs for home use are also available. If willingness and desire to have an out-of-body experience are the keys to this strange phenomenon, then perhaps the Gateway seminar really will help many people. Other students and inquirers might not find the week-long program suited to their temperament. Whoa. So that is the first time I've heard constructive. I would call that. What's up, Corey? What's up, brother? I got your text, man. I'll respond to him. Don't worry. Just been super busy. But that is the first time I've heard constructive criticism of Robert Monroe's stuff. And the very first time, honestly, because I did brief through this book, but I don't remember reading this part. The very first time I ever heard anybody say, hey, you know what? I think Robert Monroe actually talked about his out-of-body experiences in a different publication. And not only in that publication, he used a false name, but there's one experience in that publication that doesn't go along with the other things, and it's all about sniffing glue. I don't know, man. I have to go find this book I got to go find this book and see, because if I read it, I'll know if it's Robert Monroe, because I've studied this guy extensively. I'll know if it's him. So I'll let you guys know once I read it. For sure. Holy shit. Yeah, that was interesting. That's got me thinking, man, for sure. Listen, we got to roll out of here. I did get a text message back from Mark, right? So that's going to happen. Remember, that's coming up soon on this broadcast. A neighbor of mine, a friend of mine, shot 8 times, but had 4 OBEs while he was in the hospital. Lived through this whole experience. Can't wait to talk to him. Claims he saw all kinds of stuff. Talked to a man that was helping him in the astral realm. That's all the details that I know. We'll get more when he gets on this broadcast. Thanks for listening. please support the broadcast. If you haven't, if you can, please do so. If you can't support, you can all share the program, talk about it, help it grow. Make sure you subscribe, like the videos, that kind of thing. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. If Mark comes on tomorrow, we'll be on tomorrow. Probably at a different time. Either way, it's going to happen. Night, y'all. Sweet dreams.